Okay, it is 4:02 p.m. We are out of executive session and no actions were taken in executive session. So the next item on the agenda then, 7A, is update on the long drop program. So as said earlier, we do not yet have a grant agreement. I have been working with London Middlebury on trying to finalize the customer communications in relation to that. I have it on my list that I haven't done yet, drafting a press release that announces it, because the last time I was in speaking to the Addison Independent, they were interested in running a story on it, because, I mean, on these two linked affordability programs, because it's a good story, it's relevant. So I think that will be good. So a couple of other things that are on the to-do list there is, so I mentioned last time we signed the agreement with CVOEO. So I spoke to the Waitsfield operations team to let them know. And just earlier this morning, I wrote a mail to Kurt and Roger, just saying, okay, here's, we need to brief customer service to make sure that they know what's going on. And the first thing that I discussed with CVOEO is doing kind of a soft launch while we're waiting anyway, to do a revalidation of the two households that we've grandfathered into the ACP program, because it's been about 3 years since we did their initial verifications. So I said, all right, but again, we need to make sure that we communicate with these households and let them know this is happening, so they're not getting a cold call from CVOEO and they don't know what's happening. So I have to say, I've been very impressed with the communication from CVOEO. They seem really eager and they're emailing all the time and saying, when are we going to get these customers? And I said, after we tell the customers, we want to make sure that we're not confusing anyone in our eagerness here. So that's all going well according to plan. So with my Vacuda hat on, as mentioned earlier, we're working on, because we have the standard terms and conditions of service, but there's also going to be a separate customer agreement that governs the specifics of this long drop grant program, because people are obviously they're putting in their information. If they're not going through the income eligibility with CVOEO, then there is still an exclusion at the high end for incomes over $750,000 a year. We can do the checking of the property values our side. We don't need to be asking them to warrant that. But then there's also this minimum service commitment of 1 month for every $500 of cost that's expended to the grant program. So the agreement covers that, and then also, again, just sets expectations around reasonable remediation of property and so on and so forth. So within Vacuda, we agreed that Vacuda would work on a boilerplate template agreement. And so with my Vacuda hat on, I'm leading that project. So I got the draft from the Vacuda lawyers last week, and I have it open. I haven't looked, I've glanced at it, but I need to actually go through it with a fine-tooth comb and then work with them to get back a boilerplate. And then we will take ownership of the boilerplate, as will the other CUDs, and then we can tweak it from there, because that's obviously something that we want to have. It's not terribly time critical because we obviously still haven't launched the program, but I want to be having these things ready in pretty short order so that when we have people in and then we have a sense based on the existing scouts, for example, then we can start to reach out to them to say, okay, here's the agreement we're going to have you sign. Are you sure you actually want to do it? Because that secondary step is going to be necessary before we say, yes, this address is definitely going forth. So the one piece of work which I want to bring to the next executive committee meeting is an RFP for administration services around this, because we've talked about this before, but going through this process of reaching out to the customer to say, okay, you've entered your information, we've now done the scout, here's the template agreement, are you okay with this? And then also later on down the road, presuming they say yes, doing the coordination to schedule between the contractor and the customer, if necessary, because we're not assuming that that if there's no one project managing this process, that everything will work smoothly. I think if anything, we can assume that the opposite is the case, because this is above and beyond the typical scope of what WCVT does. So there's a couple of potential bidders. WCVT is one, London Middlebury is another. Other CUDs that have more staff, we could put it out to them as well. But I want to have an RFP for this, because the one thing I know is I don't have the bandwidth to be doing all this customer communication in the sort of time frame, responsive time frame that we would want, and there is money in the budget for it. So I have put some thought into what needs to be in there, but I don't yet have a draft that's ready for you guys to approve the scope of the program. But I want to get that done for the next executive committee so that we can get that issued and then have that award done sometime in January. So that's what I'm doing right now with that one. And then, of course, the next RFP is around the contractor itself, but that one is a little bit further down the road because we're not going to be issuing that until we have some sense of what's the quantum of how many people are interested and where are they. Any comments or questions? Deafening silence.
Well, I mean, I would just say, I think it's great to start to envision how the pieces and parts are going to work.
Yep, agreed. Okay. So if there's nothing else on that, we can move on. So the next update under 8A is Network Management Agreement. So there were, as I communicated last time, there are a couple of small details that we're kicking back and forth. So around things like, well, we probably actually don't need to get into the details. But long story short, Eileen sent some information over. I reviewed it, gave it a thumbs up. I sent her some information back. She looked at some of it, gave it a thumbs up. Some of the other bits she's still looking at. And then there's one piece that she and I were both reaching out to our contacts to see if they had any boilerplate language we could use. But I do think that we're quite close to having general agreement in principle on the items we've been discussing all along and how we'd like those to work. And then the next thing to do is when we have a final set of here's all the changes we want, to go back to the original and do a side-by-side, just because if there's Nancy's nodding, but if there's one thing that I know about document editing, it's that if you spend all of your time looking at the change document and you don't take the time to go back to the original document, you're almost certain to have missed something or misinterpreted something or left something to the wayside. So it's great that we're feeling pretty good about the details of what we've been discussing for some months, but we need to go back now and just make sure there's nothing else missing. So for the purposes of efficiency, I want to make sure that we essentially get something which is as close to final as we think it can be before doing that final check. And I've discussed this process with Eileen and Roger as well, so they're aware of it. So that's where we are. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern. Steve.
Yeah, when is she getting knee surgery? Isn't it like right now?
I'm not sure.
It is like mid-December or something like that. And it sounded like she wanted to get it all put to bed before she was laid up. I don't really know what that meant. I think the high level stuff is what we want to make sure is in order before she goes away. And it sounds like you think that's the case.
I think the things we've been talking about before, the only one that I think is really outstanding is just, again, this language where we have agreement in principle, but we're trying to reach out. I mean, she's been calling it carrier services, but this notion of how do you define something whereby when we're outsourcing something to them and trusting them to do it properly, that if there's some sort of a major problem, that we're held harmless, because we want to make sure that that wording is clear and comprehensive and is not so overly prescriptive that we want to be monitoring every $5 billing error. So that's the language we're looking for still. Okay. Anything else on this? Okay. All right. Finance Committee. We talked about some of the Finance Committee in executive session. Lynn and Size, anything else coming to mind? I feel like the rest of the Finance Committee was pretty straightforward. We reviewed the most recent financials a little bit, and we talked about the draft budget a little bit, which I tweaked. And again, what I sent out to the governing board as part of the governing board pack on Friday last week was updated with as far as we have into the year now actuals and then projections through the end of the year. So as usual, our pro forma is as accurate as it can reasonably be with a couple of weeks to go. And then the budget reflects the best understanding with the, again, caveat that the bead budget we know is completely wrong, but we can adjust that next year when we know more.
Ellie, can you remind me who's on the finance committee?
Okay, so it's myself, Cy, Lynn, Magna Dodge, Rich Warren, Jeff Glassberg, and Nick Costin. Is that right? Did I miss anyone?
Jeff's been attending?
Jeff did not attend the last one. He attempted to attend and he had something that came, yeah. But he did send his apologies.
And who was
And
that
he's-
last person again?
Nick Costin, he's from
Nick
Shoreham.
Costin.
Yeah, I think it's a good committee.
Mm-hmm.
Nice,
You know,
nice.
Nick brings a different perspective. I think, he's got a ton of experience. Adam, Nick. He was, yeah, he's a good member, helpful.
And so great,
Yeah.
we've got Magna back. We've roped Magna back in. That's terrific.
Yeah, and she's been really useful as well. She had
I
some
bet,
very
I
good,
bet.
very
I mean,
good strategic advice
yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
Yay for Magna.
Yeah, I think that the committee feels really strong to me. So I don't know if you have that same feeling or not, but I think there's a lot of collective experience on this committee.
Yeah, no, it's
Great.
a nice group and the questions come from different perspectives and that's really helpful.
Mhm.
Great, thanks.
Pleasure. But yeah, I do think it's working really well. It's a great committee. Okay, anything else you guys want to raise from the finance committee? There's one other thing. We have another meeting scheduled. I forget when we scheduled it, but we scheduled it for somewhat soon to go over to talk about the corrective action plans, because I didn't want to be overloading the one meeting when we had other subjects in mind to be talking about that. So expect more on that in this committee as well. Okay. Excuse me. Next item is bead and detailed design. So bead, we know there's no update on bead. Detailed design, Steve and I have been working through with JSI on the detailed design. We were focused on Ripton first and then have moved into Middlebury. And so JSI has delivered a high-level design. Steve has been looking at the high-level design. I think one of the implications, or one of the things that I just wanted to pull out and talk to you guys about, because we talked about it with JSI, is that a number of the obvious bead routes I already submitted poll applications for back in March or April, something like that, so that I would be able to have updated information as part of the original bead bid. I didn't do absolutely everything, and I certainly haven't done Ripton, because we know that it's going to be a while with the permitting before we can, sorry, Spada, before we can get there, and you don't want to be putting in poll applications when you know perfectly well you won't be licensing them for over a year, because things could change, and it's just not respectful of GMP's time. So there's some more that I'm going to be putting in for routes that we haven't done, mostly in East Middlebury. But a lot of the ones like up Route 7 into New Haven, like, the areas that we would have been wanting to build, even if we didn't get bead, the high priority ones where there's a lot of unserved, underserved, those are already in. We understand those costs. Part of what JSI did with their work is there was an original plan in the high level design that was done earlier this year that had a crossing of Otter Creek kind of by Town Hall Theater and over by the Ilsley Library in that reconstruction. And in the reconstruction, the utility poles that were there are no longer there. So JSI identified another route that goes over by the police station and then, south across Otter, because we have to cross Otter Creek at some point. So this is one of the alternate ways of doing it. And so we spoke with GMP about this because we happened to have our monthly call Thursday last week, and to see if they had any immediate hazards as to why that wouldn't work, and they said no. And of course we just have to check how busy those polls are, but I put in that poll application last week and we need to pay for it. We may need to do kind of off-cycle payments on that just to get the field reps out there as quickly as possible, because we want to identify as quickly as possible whether or not that's a no-go for some reason, because if it is a no-go for some reason, then we are going to need to look at alternate routes. And Zapata's got her hand up.
I do, and it's because I'm not quite sure how it's applicable, but the Otter Creek is a traditional navigable water which is regulated by the Army Corps of Engineers, which includes jurisdiction of anything that is run over, under, or through the Otter Creek. Because the poles are already there and there are wires already in place, I don't know if the same standards of jurisdiction apply. As opposed to a new route entirely, but we'd probably want to check in with Mike Adams at the Army Corps to determine their jurisdiction to see if any approvals by them are necessary.
That sounds like a good suggestion, Zapata. If you have a contact there, would you send it to me?
Yep,
Well,
I'll
I've not
send you
had
an
to deal
email
with them
now.
so far. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, the other one that we looked at, Ellie, 6 or 8 months ago was Pulp Mill Bridge, which is also viable according to some of the town people, the Shire town people seem to think it would be
Sweetie, you want to
doable.
say hi to the
So
people? Hi.
Hi. Oh, she's
So with the pulp mill bridge, Steve, again, that may fall under Army Corps of Engineers, and
Right.
there's also an endangered bat species. So there may be time of year restrictions for any disturbance to that area.
yeah, what she had indicated, it sounded really bizarre to me, and I don't think we want to do it in general there because it doesn't seem nearly as it's an unusual solution, and it probably would be far more time consuming to restore service that's crossing the Otter Creek than restoring service that's just running down a pole line. And so what she had suggested anyhow was that we would be attaching our cable. It wouldn't be touching the bridge itself. There's a walkway that runs along the side of the bridge, and that her suggestion had been that we lash our cable to the handrail, which it'd be fine. It's it wouldn't be my first choice, but that was what she was looking at. I don't think that really speaks to your concerns about Army Corps of Engineers, but I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The only reason I say that is because it's something that's new that's still going over the Otter Creek and the Pulp Mill Bridge because it is a known structure for an endangered bat species, that there may be concerns around their disturbance that might still fall under that jurisdiction. But that just doesn't sound like a good idea to begin with.
Well, this is an important one, Zapata, and if you think that there's some risk here, we're going to need your help because we really, really, really need to get to Weybridge from Middlebury, and there's no way to do that without crossing the Otter Creek. And so, if we run into some challenges, we might be asking you to pull in some favors, or I don't know what. But we don't want what happens with that hub when we built out the hub in Middlebury, and it's only connected back down to Leicester, which is probably where it's going to end up going. If there's ever somebody hits a pole down on the south end of Route 7, Middlebury goes dark. So we've got to get to Weybridge. And so it's just, we have time now. Thank God. Look what it is. It's not even next year. And as Ellie said, we may not be building anything next year because things are going so slowly. So maybe we have plenty of time. Maybe it'll be fine.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
that isn't
and-
good news in any case, Steve.
Yeah, and Steve, I'm not concerned about it. It's just that there is a jurisdictional oversight because Otter Creek is a traditional navigable water. So I'm gonna write an email tonight. I'll copy Ellie on it, Mike Adams at the core will ask the question, the polls are already in place. We would be adding an additional line to the existing polls. Is there any jurisdiction or approvals necessary? He'll give us a quick answer. And then if there's any type of self-verification or permitting, that's something that I can assist with, and we can get going. So I'm not concerned from a time standpoint. It's just kind of like NEPA or other projects that require ground disturbance where there might be natural resources involved. There may be some regulatory and permitting that's required for certain locations.
Yep, understood.
Thank you, Zapata. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Yep. And I think, Steve, the other thing this makes me think is that remember you were pushing WCVT for a different meet points, like up Route 7 into New Haven, or up a Dog Team Road or something like that.
Yeah.
So because we originally discarded that, I think, because it was a longer route and didn't really give us any additional redundancy. But in the event somehow that we have a crisis and can't get over the Otter Creek, but I would still want to get over Otter Creek because there's still portions of Middlebury that we would eventually like to serve. So I'm just thinking like there's sort of like short term and long term here, but we have options and we do have time.
Yep. Yeah. As long as we just keep an eye on it, don't let it die of neglect, and we'll be fine.
Yep. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about on the detailed design, Steve?
Well, I do want to mention something. Aren't you and Zapata heading to Ripon tonight?
We are.
Perhaps you could inform those of us who don't know what's going on.
Tourism. No. So the unfortunately the Ripton school has not had any elementary school has not had any students. I think this is the second year now, and the Zapata, correct me if I'm wrong in the details here, but the school district has voted to return the property to the town. And we have an easement on that property, which was signed by the school district. So we basically just want to go and speak to the select board, remind them that this easement exists because they're taking ownership of this property, of this parcel, and explain to them the extreme importance of this and just update them on our build plans. That's basically it. So it's a little bit of public relations.
Yeah, because the way I got it from the town clerk was, this is what's going to happen because the town meeting day, right? It's put up to a vote on town meeting day. And are we still interested in doing something there on that property? And the answer was yes.
Yep. We have an easement.
Yeah, but it seemed to me when I saw that kind of from your perspective, we're already set. We're not going to lose that property because the property is sold, right?
We have an easement. We have a perpetual easement. That's why we have an easement. It's not a lease. That could potentially, it's one of the reasons.
Okay.
I imagine it's quite a big question for the town about whether they want to spend $1 to get the property and the building, or whether they want the school district to keep it, because it's no small thing to take that on.
It's a nice building.
Yeah, but regardless, it has been a while since we've been up to Ripton, and it's worthwhile because we've spoken to Middlebury more recently, and we've spoken to, I can't recall, that was probably about a year ago the last time I was in Ripton, and they are a member town, and it's good to keep them updated with what's going on, especially because of all the challenges of Green Mountain National Forest permitting and the fact that when we do get beads, they're still going to be behind.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're going to do tonight is pitch perfect. It's basically say, just to catch you up, here's what we've been doing. Here's what we ended up with. You're telling me it's an easement, so we're okay, but other people may not. I didn't know that. I didn't know that if it's an easement, you can't get out of it. So you might want to speak in fewer syllables or something like that to help them understand that it's a done deal, basically. But I think respecting them by telling them that it's there, and so then they can also maybe be able to communicate more clearly to the town, members of the town in March. Great, right? Yeah, great. Yeah, I pitched Ellie before about the idea of there's a story. Ripton is the story. There's a story about Ripton that's been going on since the very beginning of our operation. You know, lots of missteps, lots of unhappy people, lots of exciting things, all the way up to now. And it seems to me like we got to find some way to get that word out. And I know Ellie had it in mind as well. But I also think, like for example, Old Town Road. That's all part of Ripton. But I think to Ellie's point, we don't even have bead yet. Chill. So that's the way I guess
I know.
we're handling it.
But I am excited that we're the provisional bead winners because that's what's going to give us the ability to get the footprint into Ripton.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the next item on the agenda is affordability program. So I think we've actually talked about these earlier in the meeting. So affordable long drop, still no grant agreement, working on the mechanics there. And yeah, I think I covered earlier what we were doing with Waitsfield and CVOEO. And
CVOEO, yep.
yep. So I don't have any further updates. Okay, 2025 construction updates. So there are, as you know, Syracuse and Cruz are working. They have strand and fiber up in a lot of the aerial routes. There are 2 buried private roads that are, they need to be plowed and not bored. And there's just 2 different kinds of equipment. A bore is something where you dig down and then you go across, and then a trench is where you cut open the ground. So the private roads need to be trenched and not bored, and I'm working with Syracuse now to schedule that because I think there was a little bit of a miscommunication somewhere along the line about this. I think maybe they expected that they needed to be bored and not trenched and didn't realize that they could have sent crews up. But we've also had a really early winter, and I'm not sure. I mean, they've talked about maybe sending them out in January, but I'm not really sure that it makes sense to do that in January because people's conduits are anyway frozen, and it probably just makes sense to do later in the spring. So anyway, those are still on the list to do. We did get some good word from Green Mountain Power that an area down by it's like there's a ferry over in West Shoreham on Route 74, and we have been waiting on a pole line rebuild there for, I want to say 2 years, but it's been at least a year, but it is finally imminent. They have the poles in and they just need to do they need to transfer their own service, and then we'll finally be able to build that. And that's a couple of miles and quite a lot of passing. So I'm super excited about that. We'll add that to the aerial scope whenever we get that done, which is great news.
Is that a
then
Velco line, Ellie?
No, it's a GMP line.
It is a GMP line. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they were just waiting on a bunch of things. I think internal approvals and it becoming a priority, and then they needed to get the permits from VTrans because it's along a state highway. And anyway, but it's finally imminent, which is really, really great news. And then the final thing is we've been talking for a while about these railroad bores that we need to do up and around Ferrisburg. And one is Tupper's Crossing and one is Plank Road. And we have had lots and lots of back and forth on this, and we now have everything that we need with the exception of crews being available, and then VTrans threw in an 11th hour requirement that we need to have a PE on site, like a civil PE, just to make sure that we don't disturb anything. This wasn't a requirement the last time we did a directional bore, but I think, again, this is going to be after the holidays at this point. So it's a little bit less time pressure to be getting a new resource. So, by the way, if anyone has any ideas about where I might get a PE, I put in a call to Otter Creek Engineering, and they haven't gotten back to me yet. But if anyone has any other leads, let me know.
Are you talking to our Otter Creek guy? Can't remember his name.
I'm going to see Jason on Wednesday morning.
Jason LaRocque?
Yeah, I'm gonna see Jason I'll see Jason soon. So I figured since it wasn't urgent, I would just talk to him. There was Brent Rakowski as well.
Yeah, and so
and
Robert
Clark.
I've run into Brent repeatedly in his dealings. He was also spearheaded the Old Town Road project, and so they're trying to help. I think you can get something from there, but and if you strongly recommend talk to Brent, or if you want, I can call him.
Okay, I will. I'll take it up with him then.
And Ellie, Jason is still a PE, but he has retired from Otter Creek as of 2 weeks ago.
Oh, how do you like that? I'm out of the loop. That's what I get for traveling.
Yes.
Is he retired from everything?
He made the decision to sell his position out of Otter Creek and be more judicious and cherry picking the projects he wants to work on.
He'd be great
Solid
for
choice.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably still has his. He probably still has his PE, so he could probably do it for us easy.
Yep. Okay. Well, so that's all good information. Good to know. Okay, that's all that I have in the 2025 construction updates, and then we can move on to the parking lot. So I removed from the parking lot the CVOEO signed agreement, and yeah, I don't think I updated everything else. Oh, Zapata, by the way, draft personnel policy. I've requested existing personnel policies from the other CUDs that I think might have decent ones, so I'll send those along to you when I get them. Anyone else have anything on the parking lot they want to talk about? Okay. I feel like there hasn't been too much movement for the last 2 weeks because 2 weeks ago was Thanksgiving and then I was sick last week, so I was just trying to keep my head above water.
We're governing board meeting tomorrow.
Yep.
And we're kind of wrapping up some of our end of year deliverables. What's the, I know you sent us a draft of the annual report. When's that wrapped up? Is it being wrapped up tomorrow?
So what I would like to do is to have approval of the annual report with the incorporation of any factual updates prior to end of year. So I don't want to be sending this out on December 31st. I want it to go out before Christmas. But for example, I don't want to send out the annual report right now because it says we've launched 2 new affordability programs, which we haven't done because we're waiting on our grant agreement. And, other minor details like the updated customer count. So my idea, I think it's pretty much ready to go with the exception of that one page that talks about achievements. And then we also talked about potentially taking the budget and putting it into a prettier format as a final page there that London Middlebury may or may not have time to do.
And then how about the budget? That has to be approved tomorrow? Or
That has to be, yeah. Yeah, they both need to be approved tomorrow, but I'd like the annual report to be approved subject to any, incorporation of the most recent facts, as of whenever is close to the end of the year, I decide to pull the trigger and send it.
Okay. Great.
Yep. Anything else?
Ellie, I found a solution for Middlebury 7, the splitter serving area. So I'll it's actually, it was an oversight on my part. So I'll get it all pulled together. I'll redo my report to you on my findings in the high level design, and then it's up to you to do whatever you need to do.
Okay, great.
That's for those of you. Basically, we get a very, like a 30-mile view of what our network's going to look like in Middlebury. And Ellie and I go through that with a fine tooth much of a comb as we can, identify any areas of concern. And then once we've said, yes, it's a go, then they move into detailed design, low-level design and detailed design, which really fleshing things out at that point. So we are very busy. It's very fun. And it's great because we did decide to spend money, right, to do this. And it's a good use of funds. And I think I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic about BEAD. I just think it's just going to be painful. but I still think I think we're gonna get through it. We're gonna get
I think
funds.
we have been very spoiled with the federal ARPA funding. I mean, as far
Yeah,
as federal grants go, I think it was a unicorn in terms of the lack of hoops and
yep,
compliance requirements.
yep.
So, yeah, it's not the norm. So, all right. So that's that. I think the one other thing we wanted to say, just in terms of full disclosure, is JSI informed us that the number, because if you guys will recall, we had authorized JSI as part of the detailed design to do the full staking of the drops for the addresses that were passed as part of this design. And they informed us the other day that they had miscalculated the number and there were actually more homes that were passed. And so obviously our cost is going to be higher. I'm not at all worried about that. We have plenty of money in our pre-construction, and so that is fine. And if anything, it's good that we have more homes passed, because that means that when we get the distribution fiber up, that's more potential customers.
Yep.
So just wanted to pass that along for full transparency. I don't think we need to do, we've already done the procurement, but there is going to be more cost there. I think they said it was like maybe $65 to $75 per passing, and there's an extra 200 of them. So you guys can do the math. It's not huge, but just, again, wanted to be transparent. Okay, so that is it. Our next meeting then is scheduled for the 22nd of December. So I am working that day. I think I said before my planned, or maybe I didn't, I can't recall, but my planned time off is from Christmas through New Year's. So from the 25th. So basically I'm off after the 24th, and then I'm back to 5th. But I'm working the 22nd.
I am not sure I'm going to be available. I just don't know.
Understood.
I'm not available.
Good for you.
My kids are all coming to town. So yeah.
It only really matters when we need to vote on something, make a decision. Lately, our meetings have been fairly benign. Not a lot of money spending type things.
Yeah, they have been, and I think we can make a call closer to the time based on how the finance committee goes, the corrective action plans. And then, I mean, I mentioned earlier this RFP that I wanted to run past the committee, but at the end of the day, the RFP is actually really an administrative thing, and it's the procurement decision that needs to come to this committee. So I'm perfectly happy to consider canceling the next meeting and then going to, because the next one then would be the 5th of January, right after the holiday anyway. So let's consider that, and then if after finance we feel like we really need to have executive committee, I will schedule it. How does that sound? Or I'll keep it on the calendar and I will cancel it unless absolutely needed.
That would be great. That would be great.
Okay. Great. All right. So unless anyone else has anything else, we can adjourn and get back 20 minutes in our day.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
all. See you tomorrow
Night
night.
all.